be helpful because the interviewing process across industries, across types of positions are so different. And we're coming into a new world order for interviewing. In 2019, we are seeing everything and anything being evaluated by artificial intelligence. And some of those practices aren't ethical yet, perhaps, or aren't refined yet. And those of you who might be going out into pharmaceutical sales, maybe experiencing big pharma using artificial intelligence, and so I'm going to touch a little on that. But what I really want to make sure that you get from this presentation and from me today is that there's some very basic things that we tend to overlook when we start to prepare for the interview process. And that is the person in the mirror, the decision modeling that has to come from within before we start telling people our story. So that's where the framework of this presentation is what do you know about the interview process? And it really is a reframe of the questions, what do you know about yourself right now? Who are you? Where are you going? And so again, the agenda for this is just overview of some of the strategies of traditional interviewing, and then come back into some other tips of the day of, but then looking past these formats and these tips and the best 100 questions and the best answers and how to tell your story and the STAR technique and all of these things. We're really going to go with the inquiry, what if I interviewed myself? What would I find? And so let's go to part one, the interview pieces. There's phone screens and video screens. Has anyone gone through a video screen yet? Okay, it's timed, it's tight. They sometimes turn off the camera if you don't finish, and the interview within a few, that they tell you get 60 seconds and then they'll shut off the camera. But this is, phone screens and video screens are usually 15 to 30 minutes. It's usually about the position you apply to. They are trying to see if you're a good fit with the position. They may go a little bit deeper into your relevant experience and ask why this organization. And so I always say go to the top 50 typical interview questions, and you'll be prepared for a phone screen. So, and the attachment will be embedded and the presentation that you get after this today. But this is really where you want to time yourself and be succinct, because you won't have eye contact. You won't have human, either eye contact or just body language to tell you you've answered enough or you didn't answer enough. So you're going to have to really be succinct and time your own answers. And use the job description to really guide why you're a match. Not as much as how deep can you tell a story, you just want an example. And then that other part is you want to reference your resume. If it's a human and they're interviewing over the phone, it's usually human resources screening you. And so you may want to have what they're looking at in front of you as well as the job description. There's two things. When you do a phone screen stand, it opens up your chest, it opens up your voice. And if you're getting interviewed at the end of the day and you sound tired, you sound really tired sitting down. And so that's always a good thing to know. With the video, you can book at the libraries, you can book a private room and set up the space so you have, a quiet, contained room, and you can do that as well with the phone screens. So those are a couple of those tips and strategies. Behavioral interviewing and situational interviewing, most of you have probably bumped into that somewhere along the way. In training is tell me about yourself, is always those front-loaded questions, and tell me why you're here. We know those are always coming. But tell me about a time when you had a conflict with your boss in the lab. Those are things that you're going to hear over and over again in the behavioral situational interview. And there is a technique for this, and it's called the STAR technique, and it's situation, task, story starter. You tell them, you frame it up, here's the story, here's how it started. And then the action that you took and the results, and the outcomes and the benefit. So you want to make sure when you're practicing that you're standing quiet in a room you're hearing yourself articulate and using this technique. And again, there are like 101 questions, behavioral interview questions, specific sometimes even to your field that you can quickly find and we can share with you as well. But this, I'm guessing that you've run into some of this before in some of this training. So this, because the topic of today is like, what else is new? What's coming down the pipe that I should know? We're gonna keep coming at this. But when we look at the new types of interviewing, and those of you who walked in a few moments late, you're really starting to see artificial intelligence bump into interviewing. And what does that mean to me as a career advisor, someone who's coaching students through the process? It means that they're using algorithms to try to figure out if you're a good match. From the language you use, from the stories, from the I statements that you're using, to the we, how many times you use we or I. And they're not, we don't have a lot of insight into this yet. There's also a movement toward job auditions. Has anyone heard of that? That means you're on the floor for a day with potentially your team, and they're seeing how you interact, and how you work, and how you make decisions. And that's new coaching for us as well. And then meetings in casual settings. And this might be in dentistry, just to get to know you, is how do you interact with the wait staff? How do you interact in a very formal, can you hold a conversation? Can you peek in these settings that are more casual so people feel comfortable with you? That's happening. And then virtual reality again, and there's some of this coming down the pipe. I don't know how much of it's happening as in specifics to coaching, how to break this down for you. But I just saw this morning, the military is using artificial virtual reality assessments to see if you'd be good for a position in the military. So it's there, it's happening. And then the last of those video interviews where they're trying to record you and assess you and then putting that through their algorithms. So those are some of the new trends that we're trying to sort out to give you more guidance. And I wanted to make you aware because soft skills are so important today for organizations. They can get a lot of smart people. And sometimes get a lot of smart people who are really good with others, who can collaborate, who can quickly think through how many people would be affected by a decision, or better yet, work with, in your case, patient care. So they're trying to really get down to the nitty gritty of this answer. So this is a book that came out this year, and I think in the last few months. But Werner Berger has written, this is his second book about questions and inquiry. And this is fascinating about human nature research. And he's saying that in work today, all of us have to become what he's described himself as a questionologist. And we have to ask ourselves the kind of questions that matter to our life, to our decisions, to be not just, we can be employable with training, we can be employable with those soft skills, but to have a career that is the type of legacy career that most of us in this room are investing into, is to really sharpen those decisions about what you're doing and why and where and who you should be associated with. So he says this research is telling us these questions guide us to smart decisions. We need to analyze and learn from ourselves and move forward with that uncertainty that we have framed up a question, have framed up some of our decision modeling. But there's going to be so much ambiguity as we go forward in healthcare, especially, that we won't have the right answer. And we've got to have our decision modeling and our values and our core, who we are, making us the person that we want to be, the aspirational person, and the person that we are right now, merging so we can cut through and get through to the right answers for us at that time. And he keeps presenting this all the way through his book. Inquiry is so powerful, and how it can make you a better practitioner in your field. And so those choices that each and every one of us make every single day, he really frames this nicely in a way. The questions matter. The questions matter. And we have to start asking ourselves first. So that really comes to the job interviewing, and the interviewing that we're going to talk about more. And so this part of you, when you're asking yourself a beautiful question, and he describes that as the time to slow down, to start really looking deeper in your perspective and seeing past your own biases and your creative blocks and your emotional reactions. So you're in the middle of the semester. You're in the middle of a lot of things. Hopefully next week, if you really have a few moments to slow down and start thinking, what am I doing with this? Where do I want to go? What does this mean to me? If you can do this work when you have some downtime, your decisions are going to be better when you start getting into the fast and furious part of interviewing and putting yourself out there as a candidate. So he informs us that these are critical moments that we must grab and capture and ask ourselves. Perhaps existential questions, but whatever how you pass through your decision model, doing that in that space of quiet and contained. So then he sets this up again. Those few well-considered questions will keep us out of those bad traps of decision making. And when you're in a graduate program or professional program, you're influenced by a small cohort, and you're influenced by faculty, and you're influenced by the region, and you maybe be influenced by, certain things that you are pressed upon you of success. And this is where to get away from your training, to get away from some of these influences of this campus, and to really think about what you want from this is extremely important. And that comes into that question, what if I interviewed myself today, this very moment? Who would I find? And what personal story would I tell today? Do I have a good narrative? What's in my head right now? Is that, do I have positive chatter? Do I have some, wow, I'm gonna grind, this is really, I gotta get through one more day? And what does that look like if I were to flip that around and interview myself for the job or the career path that I'm pursuing? What does that sound like to someone else if I'm not sure of how I'm presenting now? And so this is a place where we all can start with our own story and just, who am I, what am I doing at this very moment? And then, once we feel stronger about that presentation to ourselves, our stories start to get easier. And so this whole part of, asking yourself, who am I? Would I rather be respected or feared? What is my biggest dream in my life? If there's that type of, when were you a child or poor? What did you want to be? When you had failed, how did you respond? If people were to ask you how you treat them, or what would you do? What do you think you would say? I'm sorry. And so those are parts that I take pause and really sit to think, these are things I really need to be asking of myself right now. And when I go again and you go deeper and you look at that person in the mirror, how do I summarize my life or a goal or my aspiration in that one sentence? And am I chasing my next step intently? Am I chasing my big idea intently? And what am I working on? What am I getting better at? These are those questions that we see time and again when we interview students for graduate school. They can't answer. And sometimes people use graduate school, and I'm not saying people do this in the professional programs, but this can happen. We're so part of the moving train that we don't take pause on this. And just asking, what does this mean to me, and how is this going to go forward? So if you can do this before you start interviewing, if you can do this in between the semesters, if you're going to start in the spring, or if you're already started interviewing and you want to take some pause, this is a good place to start. You should be questioning your own decision model. Is it faulty? Is it as sophisticated as it should be? Am I using logical models or emotional models? Am I combining both? Those are good questions to ask. Am I subject to the inherent biases around me? Do I have false confidence in my skill set? And that's okay. It's just understanding, where does that come from? Am I risk averse? Why? Why is that? And then those questions, the questions we need to ask as we're making those decisions along the way. Because if you can ask yourself now, and then someone presents you a job offer, you can understand why you're taking that in a way that you're making a major life change, other than, gosh, yes, it's a paycheck and it's in the right region of the country. So the last part that I really want to start to go, questions before you ask yourself. When you are in the interviews timing, and you're starting to go out there and you're putting yourself out there, what are you really trying to decide? And that is a really tough question. And that is, coming back to what's the most important to you. And then with the job offer and the organization or the people you're working, what don't I have? What critical information don't I have? So this is where you can start to peel back again and go, who's influencing me? When have I been at my best? When have I come up short? What have I taken a stand on and against, and what am I about? These questions keep coming at us because when you are working and you're working with people in patient care, or you're working in a lab that could be changing people's lives, you're a part of something. But are you in a place that you might be challenged ethically? Are you in a place that you might be overworked? Are you in a place that you might be pushed to your limit on an emotional context of your work? And that's where cracking your code can really make a huge impact. So this is where some more reflection in here, what else you could be asking yourself. But this really comes down to context for each and every one of us. What matters most? And if anything that you walk away from today with, I can give you more tips on behavioral interviewing. I can give you more tips, and we can work on that STAR technique in situational interviewing. And we can talk about the top 100 questions that pharmacy uses, and we can talk about all of these things. But the hardest one, the one that I get students doing in the headlights, is what matters to you most. And just taking a look at what happened in California this week, when people lost everything, right? It is the people in our lives. You don't hear people talk about things in a way that are just the most important things. And that's where you want to make sure you're framing up where you're starting from. What's the most important? Because you're going to be wooed and loud and all sorts of things because you're coming from a student to make money in fields that have prestige. And those prestige will be important to you sometimes. But this is what you're always going to want to go back to. So that's really the heart of what I wanted to talk about. And there's a part of all of us when I think about stepping in and doing a behavioral interview, or stepping in and doing a situational interview, or a phone screen. We always say we want to hear your authentic voice. We want to hear who you are. And if you're doing the work, and you're looking at examples of how people want, this organization that I'm applying to is looking for this, this, and this, and it says so in their mission, and then their job description is this. and you come in with your authentic stories and your authentic voice, they will be able to tell immediately that you've done deep work, that you've thought about who you are, where you want to go next, why you in this moment are the best fit for them. And that is, it's so hard to explain until you've been on the other side of interviewing people, how that construction has to happen. And then when you think of the professional work that you're doing as the work that you're doing as a professional student and in grad school, how much time do you have for this? Would you say, I mean, if you shut your hands up, is this less than 5 hours a week? It really is. And that's what's so interesting, is because everyone wants to see you be reflective practitioners. And in some places, we're going to be looking at some of the most ethical, challenging problems of our lifetime as you get introduced to these professions and your professional identity. Do we clone people? It's genetics. Everything is moving faster than what our value system has been able to have conversations about. And then the price, even the price of drugs, and how this is just a conversation in our politics today. And this is where we all know at some point in time, you will have to take this time to sit back and go, where do I fit in this chaos? And where do I begin to be that reflective practitioner, to be the right fit for this organization? And then that other part, after you've looked in the mirror, you know that this organization is for you, this team is a good team for you. You also know when it's not really for you, and you've done this deep work. So the last part, I want to make sure you just know those regular tips and not overlook the simple. So all this deep work, but you can't forget on the interview process to be polite, and show up on time and have manners. The next step is to make sure that you're sending thank you notes to everyone that you're interviewing with, and to be courteous that way. And then the whole part of it is just really preparing, knowing that every organization that you interview for in 2019 is going to have different processes than the one that you were at before. So a panel interview at one may not look like the same as a panel interview at another. And using your professional network and your professional associations and tools like Glassdoor to inform you. How is that interviewing process at XYZ organization? What are those questions? And what does that look like? Is it an all-day interview? Do they take you up to dinner? Do they take you out for 3 meals? What does that look like? Because we are finding that it is looking like all over the place. We can't say healthcare industry is really common around behavioral equity. 4 years ago, I could say that. Like, let's go, we'll prepare you for behavioral equity. Now with algorithms, we're preparing to make sure that you're as reflective as possible, because they are scoring around deep thinking people who have value systems, because good businesses want those people. They want people to not only be thoughtful about the human spirit, but also bring people who are good to work with, who want to think deeply about the work that they're doing. And then lastly, you want that too. And so we can talk through, interviewing and salary negotiation and all those questions with you. But if we're not really encouraging you to just find the time to take to answer some of those questions and start that reflective journal